The Sports Cast, June 7th, 2021. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all our channels, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch.tv, and Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and a review. It will help us out tremendously. Visit our website, thesportscast.net, and check out our app, The Sportscast for iOS. We had a lot of downloads this past weekend, so a lot of interest going on there. Anyways, the Mavericks have been eliminated from the NBA playoffs, going 7 games. In each game, the away team won, except the last one, which was pretty exciting. Joining us all the way from Rochester, just moved his office to the ground floor, Ryan Christa. Welcome back to the Sportscast.
Santiago, it is good to be here. Tough loss for my Mavericks, but it's what it is, and we'll see what happens to the Clippers going against the Jazz now.
Before we get into the Mavericks, did you watch the fight last night between Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather?
No, I did not. I know there's some interest in it, but not really my thing. So,
well, I watched it.
I stick to sports with balls. That's what I say.
I watched it, and you know something? I will have to say that I think some people from the boxing community could take Logan Paul a little serious in the future.
As I heard, that he is able to go with Floyd Mayweather. I know there was no judges, so there was no winner. But yeah, I mean, stay with one of the greatest fighters in the world. So I put everybody on notice, I guess.
Yes, and to be honest, when I watched the fight, Mayweather did look 44. He did look a bit sluggish, I thought, but he said it. Hey, this is. I mean, Logan was better than I thought. He's 26 years old. Went 8 rounds. Some people said Mayweather could have gone for the knockout, but of course he probably avoided that just for the entertainment of the sport. But great matches yesterday. Chad Ochocinco got knocked out before that too, by the way.
Yeah, I know that was surprising for sure.
I didn't know he was boxing. Well, I kind of knew. I think I saw his name, but I didn't realize it until like last night. But hey, sometimes you need to make a few extra bucks in retirement, don't you?
Absolutely. It always seems like you got these guys who won one last payday, so they always go to boxing or martial arts, whatever. So
hey, we'll see if we'll see someone like anyone else from the NBA. I could picture it. Anyways, into the NBA, the LA Clippers defeated the Dallas Mavericks 126-111. The only series in the first round that went to 7 games. Close matchup throughout. I was telling Ryan from game 1, I think a rivalry is brewing. Ryan, what were your thoughts over this game and over this series?
Well, we'll stick with the last night in general. It really showed. I think I guess for the whole series is that Luka Doncic was the best player on the court, but the Clippers were the best team. When Luka Doncic was able to, manufacture baskets for everybody else, the Mavericks were tough to beat, because he was able to get open looks not just for himself but for others, and others hit shots. But the Mavericks were down by 8 going into halftime yesterday. Went on a big run to start the half, got up by 5 points, and then they just fell apart. Santiago, the shots they're making for the series they stopped hitting them. It really showed, the lack of secondary option that Christa was brought in to be. He just, even for the whole series, was just non-existent. I guess really the only alarming thing with Luka was how great he was in the first half, and how second half, a lot of times he just disappeared. Even in wins, he wasn't the same. I think he's very critical of himself and overthinks things later on in the game. But you got to remember, he's only 22 years old. But hats off to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. He really stepped up yesterday. And what I thought was the big difference is that their role players, the Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris, they both went for 20 points yesterday. When those guys go for 20, it's tough to beat the Clippers.
Clippers, Kawhi Leonard finished with 28 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists, plus 4 steals in 40-plus minutes in the win. Luka Doncic, as Ryan was saying, did everything in his power to get the Mavericks into the second round. He finished with a game-high 46 points with 14 assists and 7 rebounds, but it wasn't enough. Tim Hardaway Jr. had an off night shooting the ball, and Dallas' defense was non-existent in the loss. How significant was Hardaway's performance yesterday?
Well, I mean, he's kind of carried the load as a second scorer for the Mavericks this series. So, but he's not a guy. I think the problem with Tim Hardaway is, and why he doesn't get the respect that, some games he earns, is that he doesn't do it consistently. He'll have good games and off games. The difference between a superstar and an off game is still a good game for most people. But when he has a bad game, he has a bad game and he can't hit those clutch shots. But the Mavericks do have a tough decision with him, what to do with his future, because he is a free agent, and he's going to kind of demand a big payday. So choices for Don Nelson Jr. in the front office to make.
Yesterday, after the game, there was some noise over coach of the Mavericks, Rick Carlisle. They were asking him about his future with the Mavericks. And then they also asked Mark Cuban. And Mark Cuban pretty much said, look, it's just hard to find a new coach. I think it's, going through all this whole dilemma and juggling. But it sounds like he's going to stick with Rick Carlisle. What are your thoughts over that? Was that an appropriate topic to bring up, Rick Carlisle's tenure in the Mavericks?
Anytime you lose and, in the playoffs, it always comes up, did you meet the expectations? Is this the guy to lead you to the next level? Did I reach to the highest point under this coach? Rick Carlisle's been there for a very long time, in a league of but not very stableness when it comes to coaching, to find stability, and he's just, he's a good fundamental coach. He made some bold moves in the playoffs, changed up rotations, which were helped some games yesterday. I think it kind of blew up a little bit. But, Mark Cuban's very loyal to Rick Carlisle, and that's kind of, you don't see, they haven't been successful, the Mavericks, necessarily in advancing in the playoffs, but there's very little turmoil in the organization. Players seem happy, but, you're at a crossroads. You got a budding superstar in Luka Doncic. You got to build around him. You got to keep him happy. So really, I think it depends really along the relationship that Carlisle and Doncic have. Really depend on how long Carlisle stays as coach.
Mark Cuban said, he says, I'm not just going to change a coach just to change a coach. That's what he said. He shot that down pretty quick. Mark Cuban's a very emotional guy, very involved in the stands, you can say. But Carlisle is going to stay. Speculation, always is appropriate when you lose, just like what Ryan said. He did not, like, this past weekend, there was 2 coaches that got fired, which was the Magic coach and the Blazers coach, Coach Stotts. Ryan, what are your thoughts about that? Was that a surprising move, Blazers firing Terry Stotts?
No, and I think it really came down to both parties understood is that, his coaching style, he basically got the most that he could get out of these guys in the sense of, they could never get to the next level. They win a couple of first-round series, but never, a couple of years ago they went to conference finals. But when you got a superstar in his absolute prime right now, Damian Lillard, you can't miss out, So they're at this crossroads as an organization. What do they do to bring in a new coach? Do they try to dump Damian Lillard in the sense of trying to really restart the franchise? What is the expectation? So I know Damian Lillard, has been very loyal to the Blazers, never really talked about going to another organization, wants to win in Portland. But as an organization, they might just say, it's not working with him, even though he is one of maybe the top 10 players in the league right now. I don't, they, and how many times they try to rebuild around Damian Lillard, and, now you change the coaches. So I know Damian Lillard was very big on bringing in Jason Kidd, and Jason Kidd, Lakers assistant coach, said absolutely not. So
turning down pretty quick. Shut that down really fast.
I guess it goes along. There are some people in the organization, upper level organization, were very critical of Jason Kidd's prior off the court issues they had years ago, and I guess I think that would have come up in interviews, and I think Jason Kidd was ready to move on from that.
By the way, go
yeah.
ahead, finish that thought.
No, I just say I think Damian Lillard is very loyal to people from Oakland, California area where he's from. So I think he wanted to give Jason Kidd, and I think he would mold very well with that. And you could say, yeah, that's a star player just being a star player, but literally Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant picked Steve Nash to be their coach. So superstars run the league in the NBA again because you got to keep them happy.
Another testament. By the way, Jason Kidd is a former Mavericks player. Can you see him coaching the Mavericks in the future?
I mean, I could see him coming back and coaching. He's one of those first, really changing the dynamics of coaching in the sense of players coming literally right off the court and becoming head coaches, with no experience, it's kind of a tricky situation because there's a lot of coaches who really grinded out for a long time, and never really gotten a shot to be a head coach, and it's kind of a slap in the face when guys literally come off the court and become head coaches. But what Jason Kidd did when he coached the Bucks years ago. But I think he will be a good head coach again. Point guards typically make the best head coaches because they're really the coaches on the court. So we'll see what happens with Jason Kidd in the future.
As Ryan said, Jason Kidd became a head coach right off the bat. He was coach for the Brooklyn Nets first season, I believe. Then went to the Bucks and it didn't work out, so he downgraded to an assistant coach, and he's with the LA Lakers as we speak, who got eliminated last week.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, India, I don't know if he's holding up to become the Lakers coach one day. Yeah, I think Frank Vogel is not a bad coach, but there's this perception that they kind of settled with Frank Vogel when they hired him, even though he won the championship last year in the bubble. I don't know if he's really the home run hire or that Los Angeles glamorous coach that that organization usually has. So we'll see what his long-term future is as a Lakers coach.
There was an argument I was hearing this morning that the NBA teams, doesn't really need coaches. They kind of like, for example, Steve Kerr, is he a good coach or is this because his team is good? Frank Vogel won last year with the Lakers, that big argument, but it's very, very obscure argument.
I think coaches do matter. I don't know at this level. It's not. It's how you organize your team, how it makes a big difference. Because you think about the Bulls years ago, before Phil Jackson got there, they're a team that just really couldn't get over the hump. They bring in Phil Jackson with the same glue of people, and whether they end up, winning championship after championship. So, yes, I think coaches do matter. I think Steve Kerr brought in a new system. Players play, coaches, put in a system, and then, it's how the players react to the system. And I think he had a perfect system for, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. So, yes, I think they do matter. But
can you see Steve Nash winning his first chip this year?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt when you got great players. We'll talk about, I'm sure, James Harden's hamstring injury again, but you still have Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and Blake Griffin. So we'll see what the Nets. I think the Bucks will hit them again tonight. When the Bucks I don't think played that great the other night. I don't think they shot as good as they could. So we'll see.
We'll see if they bounce back in Game 2. Clippers move on to just beat the Mavericks, as we were talking about. They go again. They go up against the Jazz tomorrow night. How do you see this series, Ryan?
There's an interesting thing we got to think about is Mike Conley's injury for the Jazz. How severe is it? Is he going to be able to bounce back? Because they were kind of going on a roll there when they got Donovan Mitchell back against the Grizzlies and won the last 4 straight games. I think the Jazz they play within a system really well in the sense of, players are able to plug and play. They're very unselfish. They hit a tremendous amount of three-pointers. And then you got the defensive stopper and Rudy Gobert protecting the hoop. So I think the Jazz are going to be too tough from what I've seen, watching the Clippers play the last 7 games. They're kind of erratic. They go up and down. In the sense, what I saw against the Mavericks is that they don't play consistent throughout the whole game. There's definitely lapses where, they'll settle for shots. They're not aggressive. It really, they need, if Kawhi or Paul George aren't leading the charge, they're not able to get the other players involved. So I think the Jazz will do a good job of trying to take those 2 players away because they're so, they play great defense. They make open shots. So I'm going to say the Jazz will probably win in 6 or 7 games.
I say 7 games. Like what Ryan was saying, Clippers were going up and down. And it's not really I've probably seen the series where I see the away teams winning. I think I saw it once or twice in my life in the past, but I haven't seen it in a bit. So it was quite interesting to see them going back and forth. And then the game.
I could see. I think as the Mavericks was disappointing because you literally, for the first time in a long time, you actually had a filled building in Dallas. You had, literally no regulations. You had 18,000 people in there. And,
compared to LA, only 6,000 were allowed.
Yeah, it's a much lower. So you're still kind of at 6,000 for LA is, better than they even were having a couple weeks ago, but that's where most teams were before the playoffs, and now most, Utah will have pretty much a filled house. They'll have to go against that. Phoenix will be pretty filled for their series, and Denver is, I think, 3/4 filled. So they're kind of behind the 8 ball in the sense of, fan involvement there. And the Clippers always kind of got that knack of, they don't have the diehard fans in LA. They'll have the fans who will show up and things are good, and you'll have a lot of opposing teams because the game's in LA. So a lot of people will like to go to LA to cheer on their team. So especially when they play the Clippers. So we'll see what happens. How fans will be involved in playoffs there. So, but I definitely think the Jazz will win in 7. I think the Suns, I think, are a much better team than the Nuggets. Especially, you can't really, the Nuggets guards played out of their mind against the Blazers the last couple weeks. But the Suns are much different, and because the Suns will play defense, for 48 minutes. Where the Blazers, the weakness, they may be a better offensive team, the Blazers at times, but the ability to make stops, which is the difference in the series, is the Blazers at times would be, severely hampered by their defense.
You can never underestimate the Denver Nuggets. They're a sneaky team, I say. They once you think you're 3-1, but they can come back and tie it up.
No, I'm not discarding the Nuggets. I'm not definitely discarding Jokic. I think he'll push the Suns, but in the end, I think that Chris Paul and Devin Booker and Ayton, they're too much for the Nuggets.
We'll see what happens. Suns, I believe in Vegas, are the favorite to win out of the West, but we'll talk about that later in the next couple of weeks. Julio Jones traded to the Tennessee Titans for a couple of Couple draft picks. Ryan, this was brewing for the past couple of days. Julio Jones wanted to leave since like the beginning of the offseason. Of course, he said it during the uninterrupted show on Fox with Shannon Sharp. What are your thoughts about this move for the Titans? Is the Titans now a contender in the AFC now?
It's unique because still, when you think of Tennessee Titans, what makes them successful is the ground game with Derrick Henry. But now you got A.J. Brown and Julio Jones and Josh Reynolds, which is, I think, an underrated pickup, the third receiver for the Rams for the last several years. I think this will be a dangerous team. But, I don't know if it's enough to bring him over the hump. Is Ryan Tannehill a good enough passer, to keep everybody happy? We'll see. But it's definitely an eye-opener. But here's what I said. I think the Falcons were hoping to get a first-round pick and was kind of holding out. But I think eventually it got so bad, they start their mandatory minicamp tomorrow. So you really just wanted to put this whole situation to bed by then. So I think that was the point of this deal this weekend. And I think, Julio Jones was a good teammate, good for organization. He never really complained. So they kind of really let him pick and choose where he wanted to go. But he couldn't go everywhere because of his contract situation was so high. But this is a good move though for the Falcons. Not necessarily for the compensation they got back, but for the amount of money they're saving. It really just loosens up their franchise to be able to sign several players. Not just obviously for the rest before this season, but going forward for the next season. I think it's good, and it kind of lets they got Calvin Ridley. They just drafted
Kyle Pitts.
So now you still have plenty of weapons from Matt Ryan.
They're not empty-handed.
No, I still think their offense will be good, and the offense has never been the issue in Atlanta. It's always been their defense. So we'll see what happens.
Where would you put the Titans? Top 4, top 2, top 5? Where would you put them?
I don't think I even move them. I think they're a top 5 team last year, and I'd probably put them in top 5 still. But I still think that nothing's really changed for me. I still think the Chiefs are number 1, the Bills are number 2. I maybe move in the Browns in number 3.
Wow.
And then maybe that's where Ravens, Titans, I think are sliding for 4 or 5. But that's which
8 rivalries brewing there because the Ravens did beat the Titans this past postseason.
But here's another. I think there's talking about obviously we're talking football for a minute. AFC. Watch out for the Indianapolis Colts. I think, bringing in Carson Wentz, giving him a fresh start. He obviously hasn't been the same player we've seen the last couple of years. So having him hopefully at 100% in a new organization with a lot of talent around, maybe not necessarily skill position, but I think it's a very good roster. I think Carson Wentz could, if he plays up to his potential and everybody around him plays well, could put the Colts in the top 5.
He's also working with his old quarterback coach from the Eagles, who's now with the Colts, so that could help his familiarity as well.
Yeah, no, I think the Colts are definitely a team, maybe not getting all the pub, but it definitely AFC, watch out for.
Definitely do it right now before the Jaguars get better, right?
Jaguars, yeah, I think the Jaguars will be fine this year. I think they'll win 4 or 5 games. I think Trevor Lawrence will show you why he's picked number 1, but also show you why he's a rookie at times too. They're just, I think they drafted well in the sense of, you got Trevor Lawrence, and now you got, along with James Robinson, now you drafted Travis Etienne. You got some help for him in the backfield, so I like what they're doing.
How about Tebow?
I love Tebow, Santiago. So, but I also know it's a very weird situation coming in and playing tight end after not playing for several years. If anything, this is a nice distraction for Trevor Lawrence because all the attention isn't on him during all these camps. So,
How many games will Tebow play?
I don't know. I think it's a pretty low shot he gets any games in, and maybe the preseason games. But
yeah, that's what I was asking. You could say 0.
I think 0 regular season games. I think he makes it halfway through the preseason.
And preseason is only 3 games this year, guys.
Yep. So yeah, 4 must be playing the Hall
of Fame game. Well, it's only 2 teams play that. Anyways, NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Let's go for a quick recap. What's going on? Avalanche is tied with Vegas 2-2. Montreal is up 3-0 against Winnipeg Jets. Islanders are tied with the Bruins 2-2. Your Bruins. And then Tampa Bay's up 3-1. How is this Stanley Cup playoffs forming up for you, Ryan?
Well, definitely not my Bruins, Santiago. My Penguins got eliminated by the Islanders in the first round. But it's still, I still think Vegas, if they can get through to the Stanley Cup Finals, should be the team to beat. But they're getting pushed around a little bit there, and that's a good series. Other than I'm really, really surprised about the Canadiens beating the Jets this badly. The Canadiens that kind of took the Maple Leafs by storm in the first round. Coming back from I think a 3-1 deficit to beat them, but I really to me it's Vegas' cup to lose. I think they're just the best team right now, but the Bruins and Islanders I think is a very fun series. They're both 2 teams that play fundamental hockey. They don't give you anything easy, make you work hard to get goals, but they definitely have the playmakers on both teams, to make that extra play to score.
There you have it. We haven't brushed on the NHL much this past couple of weeks, but things are forming up, and hopefully towards the Stanley Cup finale, we'll definitely be talking more of what's going to happen. But Ryan just said it, so we'll see how it goes tonight. Game 2, Bucks at Brooklyn Nets. Ryan, Christa, who do you have?
I think the Bucks even up the series 1-1 heading back to Milwaukee.
If not, is this the Nets series to win it?
No. The Bucks got to win one of the next 2 games. That's all I can say. So if they don't win tonight, then they got to win the next game in Brooklyn or Milwaukee.
Late tonight, Ryan might be staying up with that if he has coffee. Denver Nuggets at Phoenix, 10 p.m. game. Ryan, who takes game 1?
I think the Suns. Like I said, I think the Suns are just in a better spot right now. But don't discredit the Nuggets and Jokic. He's the MVP for a reason. So, but Suns just got too many weapons. I think what they did to the Lakers, with AD or without AD, they were just a better team than the Lakers, I think, overall, and that's why they won the series.
But what if it was a healthy Lakers team? The whole dynamic changes?
It changes, sure. I mean, AD is one of the best players in the world, but I think I saw enough out of the Suns to think that they were a better team right at that point. I just think that the Lakers never had injury problems this year, and then they just never really got back on track. So
yeah, short off season. Season ended in October. Then they started again in November.
But you remember, I mean, 2 months before the end of the season, the Lakers are first or second in the the conference. But both LeBron and AD both got hurt and missed a lot of the the last couple months, and they just never really were the same team.
Random question: if you were a coach, would you take Anthony Davis or Joel Embiid?
That's a good question. I think Anthony Davis. I think Anthony Davis is seems a little Joel Embiid can hit the 3-pointer, but he's not going to really take you to the basket. He posts up. That's like his thing. But Anthony Davis can shoot, drive. He's just taking his game to the next level, which we just didn't see this year, especially during clutch moments. But I think we'll see a full strength Lakers next year, which I think will again put him at the top of the list to be title contenders. They just need to find some shooting, Santiago. It's the year 2021, and if you can't shoot the ball, you're not going to win many games, because all teams are doing is just pack the paint and make those guys shoot. So we'll see what the Lakers do in the offseason.
And things will get complicated with the Lakers when Klay Thompson comes back with the Warriors next season. Poll question on Twitter: what is the best chocolate ice cream flavor? Options are chocolate fudge brownie, chocolate peanut butter, chocolate mint, or Rocky Road. What are your pick? What is your pick?
Chocolate mint.
Chocolate what? Mint?
Yeah.
That's a good pick. And chocolate mint is tied with peanut butter and Rocky Road, and fudge brownie is last.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, of course, you could definitely vote that in our Twitter page, The Sportscast 1. Ryan, Christa, what is the best way to reach you online? Talk to you about, are we seeing the best Phoenix Suns team in history?
Mad report on Twitter, but I don't know. Charles Barkley might have other comments on that. Santiago, we can't end this conversation without talking about USA's big victory last night over Mexico.
Yes, USA won the Nations League final 3-2. The game was Mexico was leading 1-0, then it tied 1-1. Then I think Mexico scored again 2-1. USA tied, and then at the end, Christian Pulisic scored the penalty, made it 3-2. Pretty exciting. A full USA A squad playing at your Mile House Stadium in Denver, Colorado. Ryan.
Yes, I mean, I don't know how the world will rate that Mexico squad, but it was good. Anytime we can beat Mexico in the championship final is good. There's an important couple of months coming up with World Cup qualifying, Santiago, so we can't miss out again. So hopefully it'll give us
and of
some
course,
confidence.
Yeah, and of course with this win, we'll definitely gain his confidence for the qualifiers and also the Gold Cup this summer. And of course, we got the Euros beginning this weekend, so pretty excited. And of course, you could follow us all along on the sportscast.net and on Twitter at the Sportscast1. Ryan, Christa, before we go, quick updates on your Sharks.
So we got our first win last weekend. I don't think I've talked to you since then. So we're 1-2.
I heard actually. I don't know if you told me or I just heard from Twitter or something. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So 1-2 right now. Got a couple week break before our next game. Just some scheduling funk. That is. But we'll see if we can keep the ship going on when we start back here in a couple weeks. But so good things are happening in Sharkland.
Sharkland. And before we go, Brad Stevens is no longer going to coach and just be basketball of operations in Boston.
That was a strange situation, Santiago. I was like, I remember that morning last week. Driving, saying, first I hear Danny Ainge, is retiring. I'm like, okay. The next thing I know, 5 minutes later, Brad Stevens is stepping down as coach and taking over Danny Ainge's position. So I think the Boston organization values Brad Stevens as a basketball mind. And I think if things don't work out as whoever they pick as head coach, then maybe he'll come back and take over again. But I think he was just getting a little burned out. I think when you have high expectations and you're not necessarily meeting them, and it kind of wears on you, that day-to-day travel and this last season it took a lot of they did a lot of traveling, Santiago, these NBA teams. When you play 76 games, 76 games in a much shorter time span than you would normally play 82 games, it wore on everybody. So I think he wanted to step away from coaching, but Boston didn't want to lose him in the organization, so this is the best fit. So it's really interesting who they're going to go for as their next coach. You got rumors of Floyd, from a lot of different people. And the most interesting would be, female coach Becky Hammond, who is currently the assistant coach for the Spurs. So I think that would be a name to really watch out for.
Yeah, I heard she's a strong contender. So we'll definitely keep you guys up to date what happens in Boston. Big basketball legacy there, and they want to see something going. They haven't won anything, since 2008. So, we can hopefully hope best for the Celtics. I know they have strong legacy as the Lakers. So we'll see what happens. And Paul Pierce was at the fight last night, so it was strange to see him there. Anyways,
yeah, so we'll see what happens. We'll see who the candidate is for the Magic. I think that's somebody who's going to have a really rough go about it right now with the state of the Orlando Magic.
Steve Clifford.
So you have two openings. Yeah, Steve Clifford, I think, was just a victim of circumstances. I think the organization, is definitely going in a total rebuild mode after they traded everybody at the trade deadline. So I don't think it's necessarily Steve Clifford's fault. I think the organization knows that. They might not think he's the guy who they want to bring in to rebuild the organization. So I think that's more or less it. Steve Clifford could be a guy who can take a good team to make, overachieve. I think the Magic a couple years ago when they made it to the playoffs was pretty much the same core of players they had this year. But they never were able to kind of build off of that. Next year they kind of took us, didn't really improve. And then this year they kind of were a dumpster fire before the trade deadline. So that's why they traded Aaron Gordon, Vukovic, and Evan Fournier. So they really have not a lot to build off of right now, but they'll go through the draft and, maybe a free agent or two. So,
hey, hopefully they'll bring back the Penny Hardaway Shaq days, but it takes time. Anyways, Ryan, Christa, thanks for coming on to the Sportscast.
No problem, Daniel. Have a good one, everybody. God bless.